We are live and let's get started. We covered up to verse 21 last week. So this chapter is sannyasa. So I'm not going to explain the different types of sannyasa anymore. I'm sure it should be in the head of everybody.
Sure.
But that classification was very important to understand this chapter. The reason is whenever people talk about sannyasa, everybody's mind, it is the conventional sannyasa. But what Krishna meant was the sannyasa of the fifth kind, which is a true sthita prajna, the sannyasa of the body and the mind. So that's where the confusion came in. And we spent a lot of weeks discussing these topics one by one. And finally, last week, verse 17 to 21, we were on a topic pretty much similar to chapter 2. So in chapter 2, we talked about sthita prajna lakshana. This is exactly that. The sannyasi is also the true sannyasi, or the fifth kind of sannyasi, or the sannyasi meant by Krishna is the fifth category sannyasi, which is nothing but a sthita prajna. So we saw, that is the topic we were in, right? So we were talking about some of the characteristics of this sthita prajna, and we went through a few verses and we stopped at verse 21. So the verse 21 is very interesting verse. What he said was, see, asaktatma. Asaktatma means the one whose mind is not attached. As asakti. So the person who is not attached to what? To the bahya sparsheshu vindati. So the gains from the external objects. What he gets, because a person who is not dependent, it's not that he don't want it, but he is not dependent. He is not addicted to the external world of objects. He gets sukham, right? And from where he gets the sukham? We all get happiness, right? We all get happiness. Typically, you can just think of, typically the happiness we get will have some trigger, right? Maybe a promotion, or maybe an ice cream, or maybe a trip, or maybe the birth of a family member, or something great happened to a family. So there will be some trigger. But in this particular case, for a sthita prajna, he is not dependent on the external objects for deriving that happiness, because he finds that happiness within himself. Just think through that. He finds that happiness in himself. That is what is Krishna said. To illustrate this, I read a beautiful article in a psychology magazine. One of the most rewarding experience for each one of us is when? Deep sleep, or in a deep meditation. From where exactly you got that happiness in deep sleep? I'm not talking about a dream-based sleep. The happiness can vary depending upon the content of the dream. For example, if it is a sad dream, I might be sad. But a dreamless sleep, a deep sleep, you feel contented. Why? This goes back to Yoga Sutra, right? So the Yoga Sutra tells the normal happiness one person experience is because of a mental activity. The ahankara in you typically see a particular mental activity as happy or a mental activity as sad. And then you get some experience. But there is a problem for that happiness. That happiness is dependent upon time. It has a beginning and it has an end. Always. And that is why it is called a bliss. That is, but when the consciousness do not have anything else to show, typically what happens? The consciousness illumines the thought that happens in your mind. So what happens? The consciousness get identified with that thought, and based upon your likes and dislikes, you feel happy and sad. But imagine a state if there is nothing else for the consciousness to illumine. That is the state of the deep sleep. Your mind is completely shut down. Even your sense of ego is gone, but the consciousness is still there. When the consciousness do not have anything else to illumine, you are not conscious of that state, but when you wake up, you feel that you're happy. And that is what is happening in deep meditation. When you don't have anything else to show, what happens? You experience that inner peace. Usually what happens? This consciousness cannot always get identified with the thoughts. So here, in the case of a jnani, even though he is not in a sleep state, even though he is not in a samadhi state, meaning conventional yogic samadhi, he knows that I am different from the thoughts. So he is able to view the thoughts in a pretty objective fashion. As a result, he experienced that happiness within. This is what Asthita Prajna Lakshana. He don't need, means he will interact with the world. He may watch a movie, but he is not watching the movie for gaining more happiness. Everything he do is not gaining more happiness. Obviously, if the heater breaks, he will go and fix the heater. It's not for happiness, it's for comfort. He knows the difference between comfort and happiness. He is not dependent upon anything externally for being happy. And that is the ultimate state. And that is the uninterrupted happiness. And that is what is mentioned in this verse. This is what Krishna is talking. And this is what we talked in the verse 21. So with that, let's proceed. Okay, so Anu won't be able to join. So let's see. So he tells, Yehi samsparshada bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate bhutaha. This is what the verse is. Again, it's a continuation of the verse we have been continuing. So here Krishna tells, he means because, ye means a universal pronoun, those enjoyments, meaning the enjoyments you typically derive from the external objects. It could be an ice cream, or it could be a person, or it could be a place, whatever it is. Whatever is the enjoyments you find from the sense objects. Whatever is the enjoyment you find in the sense objects that are born because of the contact of the sense organs with the sense organs, sense objects with the sense organs. So all the happiness I experience because of my sensual experience, a beautiful sight, or a beautiful music, or a beautiful touch, or a beautiful taste, or a beautiful smell, it gives me happiness. It gives me enjoyments. All of them, Krishna make a blanket statement. He say that te dukkha yonaha yehi samsparshaja bhogan dukkha yonaya he evate. All these enjoyments born out of the contact of the sense organs with the sense objects. In other words, all the conventional worldly pleasure, he said, eventually they are the source of pain. What in the world you can say that, right? From morning till evening, this is exactly what I'm trying. And you're saying that you're trying you're trying to going after the sources of sorrow. It doesn't sound logical. Very interestingly, the next sutra we are studying in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra is exactly the same. Patanjali tells the same. Every sense objects could be a sources of sorrow if you don't know how to approach it. See, the world is so beautiful. It is fantastic. All these sense objects has value in the world. But if you don't know how to use them properly, if you don't know how to interact with them properly, they become a sources of sorrow. Typically what happens? You get addicted to that, and as a result, it became a sources of sorrow. Why? Krishna is saying, he explains why. Why did he say that? This addiction to sense objects, right? He's not saying that you should not use sense objects, but if you have binding attachment to the sense objects, he tells it is dukkha yonaya. Yoni means womb or the source, or dukkha yoni means it is the womb that produces sorrow only. Why? He tells Adyantavanta Kaundeya. Adi Anta Vanta. They have a beginning and an end. They have a beginning and an end. Let's say that I was looking forward to a trip to Switzerland. Okay, I really wanted to go there. So now it hasn't started. I don't know whether I can make it this year or next year. Okay, this time some work-related issue came in. I could not make it. What happens? Frustration and sorrow. So when I don't get it, or any delay in getting it, or any risk I perceive in getting it, it creates sorrow in me. Please understand this very carefully. Krishna is saying that you do not have to go to Switzerland. No, he didn't say that. He said, if you say that you will be happy when you go there only, or your happiness is binding, means that is going to give me happy, then till you get it, you have pressure, sorrow, anxiety. And once you get it, what? That's why Adi, there is a beginning. It is not there yet, and you need to work for it. So you have sorrow. And then what? I go to Switzerland. I was waiting that for an year. But when I go there, 2 weeks goes like this. Anta. Every sensory experience has an end. If it is a sense objects you can see, there is something called the law of diminishing return, right? So let's say that you like a cookie. You like cookies. The first cookie is very tasteful. Second cookie is even better. The third is okay. The fourth is, oh, it's not that good. Fifth, you started getting some aversion to that. 7, it is counterproductive. So these sense objects will not give you everlasting happiness. So if you put your state of being happy to these sense objects, you are inviting trouble to your life. That doesn't mean that you should not pursue it, but know that you can get it. If you get it, enjoy it. If not, find something else. So, Adyantavanta Kaunteya Nateshu Ramate Butaha. So, the Butaha here means the intelligent one or the wise people. Nateshu Ramate. Ramate means revel in, right? So, the wise people do not see this as a means to gain happiness, because the wise people already know how to gain that uninterrupted happiness from their own self. So they don't see these sense objects as something that can add some values. Let's say that if you have, say, 100 billion or $1 trillion, let's say that you have it. and then somebody comes and give you $5 tip, what would be your attitude? So like that, you have that reservoir of happiness, infinite happiness. When you have it, these type of sensory objects will not tempt you, or will not present itself as a source of happiness. So again, the same idea. It is talking about a man of perfection. It is talking about a man of self-realization. It is telling, Ehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya etate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate butaha. Ehi means that which is born out of the contact of the sense objects. They are essentially sources of sorrow, because they have a beginning and an end. So therefore, a wise person will not see an external object as the dependent source of happiness. This is a very fundamental fact. This is particularly stated in a lot of new books. I really want to quote one book called Authentic Happiness. Authentic Happiness by Dr. Martin Seligman. He talks about 3 kinds of happiness, and he talks about the ultimate kind of happiness as what? Authentic happiness. Authentic happiness is that you find within yourself. Again, this is positive psychology, not Bhagavad Gita, but what Krishna is saying is reiterated in the modern findings. So, and I always used to quote that book, right? Always used to quote that book, The Flow, right? In that flow, a beautiful scenario is described. So let's take the example of a Julius Caesar, or a Shah Jahan, or an Akbar, or an Ashoka. Imagine the comforts they used to enjoy. They didn't have a smart TV. They didn't have an iPhone. They didn't have internet. The maximum speed of their commute in that book, it is described as 35 kilometers per hour. That is the speed of a horse. Everything, right? So now you imagine an ordinary person like me, my lifestyle is much better than the king's lifestyle at that point of time. And whatever people living at that point of time, if they imagine that lifestyle, they would have thought that this is heaven. And I know my state, I'm in that heaven. Still, I have more problem. That's a fact. And imagine, right, while you are studying, I always quote this example. While you are studying in the school, imagine the job you are in right now, or the state you are in. If you could dream that at that point of time, what would have been your conclusion? 100% happy, right? So this, we always ask somebody, let's pick Deepak, what do you think? While you are in 3rd grade or 4th grade of school, if you could imagine that you could fetch a job in US as a software engineer doing like this, would you consider it as the highest job at that point of time? Just out of curiosity.
No, I mean, even I won't be thinking that time.
Yeah, exactly. So if you could think that this is what you achieve, you thought that, oh, I got everything. Means very recently, 3 years back, somebody was crying in front of me, God, if you give me a green card, I won't ask anything. I said I had that prayer 15 years back. Then I had to revert it.
No new challenges.
This is another thing. Another beautiful example I saw in a psychology book, liberating the same concept is, let's say that when I was a kid, what would have been the dependence for happiness? Enjoyment, maximum enjoyment is a movie, right? Or a dinner outside, these things would have been luxurious things. So my happiness was dependent upon 2 or 3 objects. Right now, it's hundreds of things. Now the probability of something goes wrong is very high, always. And if one goes wrong, even if I have the 90, I would be sad. So this psychology article was saying that technically people are more unhappy. And I don't know whether I'm pretty much neutral to this observation, but there is an observation by the psychologist that the emotional issues of the human beings are more in developed countries. Has anybody thought about that? Emotional issues for the human being is much more in a developed country.
That is so true. The number of counselors, the number of therapies that people go to, it's much higher here. Yeah.
One counter argument is, olden times, the problem was there, nobody cared, or nobody knew that it was a problem. But still, the emotional issues are getting more and more. If we had used the logic, earlier logic, right? If I achieved this much, which, see, if I take myself, I could not have imagined who am I right now at that point of time. And if I could imagine, I would have thought that I would not ask anything else to God. But here I am, asking more. Right? So what happens? This is what happens. And that is exactly what is highlighted by Krishna. You cannot satisfy all your desire and think that, okay, by tomorrow I will satisfy everything and be happy. And that tomorrow will not come. 100%. Now you may ask, if you are not in that particular mood, how the life will move? Right? The life will move. Life will be more efficient. Life will be more, means you will be able to enjoy the things more. What is a successful life? Is that what you possess, or is that how you live your life every day? So if you want that kind of life, understand this. And believe me, you will earn more. You will have more gadgets around you. You will be more happy. That's what it is. One more good example, again from a psychology book. It says, like, imagine that you're putting 10 kittens in one straight line. You put the first kitten, you take the second kitten and put the second one, third one. By the time you put the third, the first goes away. This is what the fleet, and still we think that one day I'll be able to complete all my desires. And a lot of people think that retirement, you get that. That may not be. Yeah, again. So never postpone anything. Try to find that little bit of happiness. Even if you are not self-realized, try to do something that makes you happy, or try to find that happiness in the small things you do. See, when you get up, that's why the gratitude, the attitude of gratitude, that is very important. Typically, we don't know. So there is a story in the Purana. One guy was complaining that he don't have anything, I don't have any money, God is so cruel to me, etc., etc., etc. The God got so upset, he came in front of him. He said, you have millions of dollars. What are you saying? He said, no, I don't have even a penny. God said, okay, give me your eyes, I'll give you $1 million. He said, no. So like that, it's a good conversation. Means I saw this in some of the Christian context, but the story is the same. This is what it is. So please, that is what the wise person do. So wise person understand and keep the object as an object. That's it. So this is a beautiful verse of Gita. So let's continue. So the verse 23. So he tells, Shaknoti haiva ye sodum prak sharira vimokshanat kamat krododbhavam vegam sayukta sasukhi naraha. So again, another beautiful verse on the same topic, on the same concept. So he tells, Yaha. Yaha means it's a universal pronoun in Sanskrit. It means anybody, whoever he be. So that is universal pronoun. Shaknoti means he is able to. Sodum means mastery, gaining mastery. So a person who is able to gain mastery over what? Vegam. Vegam means speed, momentum, force. These are the words. So momentum is an ideal word here. So a person who can control the momentum of what? Kama krodha bhavam. So kama, born out of kama and krodha. So a person who can gain momentum, born of the desires, born out of kama and krodha. So a person who can control his emotions properly. Kama and krodha, basically they are emotions. So a person who can control the momentum of the binding desires and the anger before the release of the body. That is the beautiful word he said. He said, Prak sharira vimokshanat. Before the end of a body, before he is a yogi. Before release from the body, he is a yogi. So kama and krodha will come in the mind, but he is able to control that properly within his mind. In other words, a person who has emotional intelligence, if you translate that into the modern terminology, a person who has emotional intelligence, obviously when I see something, I may feel like the 3rd chapter Krishna said, right? Ragadvesha is not the problem. Don't come under their sway. If you remember, there was a beautiful verse which tells, Indriyan indriyartheshu ragadvesho vivastito tayo na vasham agaste. Because they are highway robbers. They will pull you from your destination. So kama and krodha, if anger is needed, right? So this is what we see in the emotional intelligence class. Anger is pretty much needed. God would not have given me an emotion if that is not required. So anger will help me to manage certain situation. But if I do have uncontrolled anger, uncontrolled desire, that is the problem. So gain that emotional intelligence, he is a yogi. Another definition of a yogi. A yogi is a person who is able to master his emotions. We saw in the sixth chapter, we will say, right? Chitta vritti nirodha, which is the Yoga Sutra definition. But this is another beautiful, who has emotional intelligence. Remember, the yoga definition is what? Your mind should not be in chitta, vikshipta, mudha. It should be either ekagra or nirodha. Without emotional intelligence, you cannot be in ekagra or nirodha. So a yogi is the one who may have emotions. These verses should remove any doubt on the mind of the people, because the other day I saw a very big criticism on yoga saying that yogis are stone-like people. Never, never, never. Who said that? So we have studied Gita so far. We studied Yoga Sutra at least 50%. Can you see one place where you should be just suppressing your emotions? Absolutely not. See, mastery over emotion is different from suppressing the emotion. That's very important, right? Say you're saying that I don't have control over my car, so I'm not going to drive. It is different from I put more effort and trying to gain mastery of the car. When I have mastery of the car will take me where I want to go. If I don't have the mastery, what happens? The car will go where it wants to go. There is a huge difference. This example is used in the Vedic scriptures. I changed the horse to a car. That's it. The Vedic example was a horse. That is why the word yoga arudha is given. Always you hear that word, arudha. Arudha means the one who is sitting on the horse, who has control over the horse. So the mind is like a horse. If you have control over the horse becomes your best companion. If I don't have control over the horse, the very same horse can take me to the hospital, or even become a cause for my death. So imagine the human mind is like that. If I do have control over my mind becomes my best friend. I just wanted to say that Krishna is hinting where, like you can see the Gita in the last few verses of one chapter. He is in his mind, he is going to, even the fourth chapter, the last few verses was a hint towards sannyasa. Third chapter, last few verses was hint towards fourth chapter. So here he is going to take us to the meditation, which is the next chapter. That is why this topic is slowly introduced. So a person who has control over the mind becomes his best friend. And a person who do not have control over his mind, the very same mind becomes his worst enemy. So a yogi is the one who has complete emotional intelligence. That's it. And what is the advantage of this emotional intelligence? Sa eva sukhi naraha. Sa yukta. Yukta means he is the one who is a yogi. The one who is a yogi is yukta. And what is his characteristics? Sa sukhi naraha. Sukhi means happy. Eva, indeed. That person, he or she will be definitely a happy person. He may not have millions of dollars. He may or may not have. Don't think that some people will take it very negatively. They think that if you have money, you're unhappy. No, that is the extreme other interpretation. Money or possessions, you may have, you may not have, but you will be happy. You'll be happy and content. This is such an important verse, such an important topic. So let's continue. Okay, so next verse is Yontus Sukhondararama. Yontus Sukhond Standar Noti Revaya Sayogi Brahma Nirvanam Brahma Bhutodi Gachati. Again, another same idea. Again, the idea is he is talking about the enlightened person. So here you can see universal pronoun again. Yaha. Yaha means not he, not me, or he, or she. See, in English you have three persons. First person, second person, third person. Here is fourth person, which is universal pronoun. Again, Sanskrit. So a language means if you want to be inclusive, you have to use this. Inclusion is not just verbalization and just speaking, right? Inclusion is through action. And when you use this, nobody is excluded. That is the power of this word, Yaha. Yaha. This is beautiful. And Srinarayana Gurudevan used to highlight this verse because he used to write about this a lot. And he used to highlight this particular pronoun, universal pronoun, because this is how you should look at the humanity. When you see divinity in everywhere, you cannot exclude anybody. And this is a word which can be used. And you can see every verse of the Gita, whenever Krishna gives an advice, this is what he used. Yaha. So people, when they say that this is sectarian, etc., it's sheer lack of understanding. That's it. So Yaha, I'm just pointing out all these verses, right? These type of things. We need to understand this. Then Yaha Anta Sukha, right? Anta Sukha. Sukha means happiness. From where? Bahya Sukha means the happiness born out of external objects. Antar Sukha means the one who finds happiness within himself. A yogi, right? And then another word used, Antar Aramaha, the one who revels in himself. He knows who he is, and he revels in himself. He is happy, he is contented. He may interact with other people, but he don't need to do anything for becoming more happy. The one who finds happiness within himself. There is a name for that person in our culture. What is that? Ramaha. This is what Rama. Anybody who can find that inner happiness, it transformed into Rama. So there is a version of Ramayana which is called Adhyatma Ramayana, which is different from Valmiki Ramayana. Adhyatma Ramayana is written by Vyasa. It is part of a Purana. And the whole Ramayana is happening in your mind. Where is Rama? In me. Where is Sita? In me. Where is Ravana? It's in me. So when you flush out Ravana, Kumbhakarna, everybody from your mind, what is going to happen? You see Rama. That's a beautiful, that is what is called Atmaram. And there is a song also, Atmarama Anandaravana. So this is again. So the one who sees the happiness in self, the one who revels in himself, and then Tadha Ambarjyoti, the one whose mind is connected with the Antarjyoti. Jyoti means what? Light. Antarjyoti means inner light. It's a symbolic representation. Inner light representing the consciousness. Right? Inner light represents the consciousness. So the one whose mind is absorbed or awakened to that inner light or the consciousness, Saha, Yaha, Saha, to that person, what happened? He is a yogi. Evaha, he is a yogi. He is indeed a yogi. One more definition of the yogi. So a person who finds happiness, earlier verse, the yogi was defined as a person who is emotionally intelligent. In this verse, the yogi is defined as one who finds happiness within himself, revels in himself, one whose mind is connected with that inner consciousness. That person is a yogi, and whose Brahma Bhuta, his identity is with what? Brahman, the reality. And then Ati Gechadi, he gets Brahma Nirvanam. He gets freedom, complete freedom. Nirvana means freedom. Nirvana technically means what? It came from the root va. Va means, you might have heard vata, right? Or vayu, flesh. Nirvana means flesh out. Something. So everything, every other identity other than the Atman is fleshed out from the mind. and that state he will be achieved. So here talking about the highest person, the person who has attained the height of spiritual progress, and he attained Brahma Nirvana Gacchati. This is again beautiful verses. So Brahma Bhuta Ati Gacchati Brahma Nirvanam, and he is a yogi. Okay, so we'll go to one more verse. So he tells, verse 25, he tells, Labhande Brahma Nirvanam Rishaya China Kalmasha Chinna Dvaita Yatatmanaha Sarva Bhuta Hiter. Another verse. Gita, you see a lot of repetition, because this repetition is needed to get into our mind. That is why it is. So he tells Rishayaha. Rishayaha means, what is the literal meaning of Rishayaha? Rishayati iti rishi, right? The one who sees. A loose translation is seer or sages. He sees something which I miss. That's all. So he sees his own identity, which most of the other people misses. So Rishayaha, what happens? China Kalmasha, with these practices of yoga or these spiritual practices, what is going to happen? Their impurities has been destroyed. But just a comment. The last two verses were describing yogi. So I was in a pretty much group discussion in our UCC event. And it is so interesting to see even yoga teachers, what is their definition of the yogi. I heard people saying that a person who can perform all asana is a yogi. So where exactly the actual yoga is lying and what is the concept even for the teachers, that's unbelievable. And they point out to Patanjali Yoga Sutra in their syllabus. And what exactly Patanjali defines as yogi and what exactly is Krishna is defining. He may do asana, he may not do asana. Like the means becomes the end. That is the problem. Anyway, that's just a joke. So Labhante, so he tells the sages, Rishayaha, China Samshayaha means all the mental impurities has been destroyed. And then all the doubts, right? All their doubts has been removed. So the doubts are removed, all the mental impurities are removed, and then what happens? Yatatmanaha, they have gained the mastery. And Rata, he had happily engaged. Sarva Bhuta Hite. So he is already found happiness within himself. But still he will be acting in the world. Why? All his action will be for the benefit of the entire humanity. Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. He will work, but it is for the benefit of all the being. There will not be any selfish agenda. So such as realized master, he will be a blessing for the entire world. So this person who has destroyed all the impurities, who has clarified all his doubts, who had all the control over the body, mind, and intellect, and who is actually engaged with the Brahman, he will Brahma Nirvana, he will gain that freedom in Brahman, and thereafterwards all his engagements would be for the benefit of the world. You could see these masters working 18 to 24 hours. Vivekananda is a classic example. He worked very hard. Look at Krishna also, or any masters of that nature, whether it is Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, everybody worked so hard, but for the benefit of the entire humanity. Because They see themselves in every being, and they will try to do good for the entire humanity. So we covered 4 verses, and mainly we touched, I think we can cover one more verse. So it's going a little bit speed because we already covered these topics in the 2nd chapter. So the 26th verse, he said, Kama krotha viyuktana yatinam yatachetasam apito brahma nirvanam vartande vititatmanaha. Again, the same topic, one more different angle. He tells Kama krotha viyuktatma. So ka means so he tells Kama krotha viyuktana. One person who is free from all the binding desires. Yatina. So those sannyasi, remember, he is using the word sannyasi and he is trying to equate that sannyasi with the prajna. Just to remove the doubt from Arjuna's mind that sannyasi is not just a person who is left the world and taken a orange robe. No, here the sannyasi means the following verses, the previous verses beautifully described. The one with emotional intelligence, the one who is connected with himself, the one who finds happiness within himself. Those sannyasi, without kama, krodha and everything, what is going to happen? Whose mind is completely controlled. Their mind is pure, their mind is controlled. Yata chetasam. And what is their characteristics? Vititatma. Vititatma means, with means to know. What exactly they know? They know the Atma. One more sannyasi's name. So we saw last week, we talked about Swami Tadaatmananda. Tada means that, Atma means, that means the Brahman, the reality. He knows that as his Atma. So that is Tadaatmananda. Viditatmananda, again, Swami Viditatmananda is the head of the current Arshavidya Gurukulam. His name means what? Vidita means the one who knows. Atma means the one who knows the Atma. So all these sannyasis name, you look at that, it will have deeper meaning. So Viditatma, and what happened? Vatate, there is Brahma Nirvanam, liberation. Nirvana means like freedom, freedom in Brahman, both here and hereafter. Apitaha, Abhi means now and Ta means later. So now and after the death also, we have complete freedom. And that is the sannyasi, not the sannyasi who just comes with an orange robe. Swami Chinmayananda, after explaining this chapter, he was joking that it is like after reading this chapter, don't get upset with the normal sannyasis. So far, you guys had a lot of respect. Anybody see the orange robe used to prostrate? But the sannyasi is referred in the Gita is this sannyasi. And this whole chapter is clarifying that. That doesn't mean that the other sannyasis are bad, right? So the other sannyasis, the true sannyasis, they took up a lifestyle, which I cannot think, you cannot think. Imagine a life without any of these worldly engagement. No, I'm not talking about the sannyasis who engage in the world 24/7. There are people like that, but the true sannyasi, it's very difficult. So this is the 26th verse. Now, 3 more verses, this chapter will be over. So please allow me to continue this for 1 more week. Usually we stop at the end of the June and resume at September, but we will do 1 more week and finish the 5th chapter, and so that we can start the 6th chapter from September. And please note that the 6th chapter is a summary of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. That's the whole summary of the Yoga Sutra. That will be good.